People love things that are fast. The delivery speed of your takeout order, how quickly your airplane gets from point A to point B. And guess what? People love fast websites too. So what is website performance? Website performance is the speed at which web pages are downloaded and displayed in a user's web browser. Basically, website performance tells you how fast your website is. Why is website speed so important? Well, website performance impacts your rankings in organic search, visibility on Facebook, and the overall user experience of your website. There are so many factors that search engines use to rank organic results in the search engine results pages, also known as the SERPs. Factors include the URL, title and header tags, inbound links, site architecture, and you guessed it, website speed. And if you think about it, that makes a lot of sense. Search engines like Google want to offer the best experience to their users. If a website takes too long to load, it will probably see a higher bounce rate. And this is even more true on mobile. If Google can surface comparable web pages that have a faster load time, they will, because they're solving for their users and helping them find their answers to their questions or solve their problems faster. Website performance impacts visibility on Facebook too. Facebook has always taken load speed of their content that appears on the Facebook news feed into consideration. For example, if you're on a slow connection, you'll see more text and image content than videos. Facebook also takes your website's performance into consideration in their algorithm, particularly for their mobile app users. If your post links to a slow website, it may not be displayed to people using the Facebook app as frequently. This means that you could be missing out on views, interactions, and traffic. Website performance even impacts the user experience. And a poor user experience affects the website metrics that you care about, like bounce rate and conversion rate. So how quickly should a page load? Well, best-in-class web pages should become interactive within 5.3 seconds. Think about that. Just about 5 seconds. Any slower and visitors will abandon your site, reducing conversions and sales. And 79% of shoppers who are dissatisfied with site performance say that they're less likely to purchase from the same site again. A slow website equals less traffic. This means that you could be losing new visitors and repeat customers all at the same time. It can be easy to think of website performance as an afterthought of the development process or as the final step in a project. The problem with this approach is that it solves for the creative process, but not for the end user. Website performance isn't just a technical concern. Website performance affects the accessibility of your site, the usability of your site, and your web design. Accessibility is the availability of a website and its contents to all people. How does performance impact accessibility? Well, think about all the different ways people might be accessing your site. Some people might use text-to-speech or magnification functionality. Others might be accessing your site from a slower internet speed. And many will be on a mobile device using cellular networks. If your website has poor performance, it becomes less accessible to everyone in a variety of circumstances. Now, usability is how efficiently and easily visitors can see or examine your website. How does usability impact performance? Well, this one's pretty easy to understand. If your website or its elements take too long to load, it is inherently less usable. Things like navigation, menus, videos, hyperlinks, forms, all of those things impact a website's usability. When you include these on your website, you need these features to be optimized to perform their best to offer great usability. Website design is the process of planning, ideating, and organizing content for the internet. Website design isn't just how a website looks, it's how it works too. A poorly designed website can lead to performance issues later on down the road. For example, the overall layout of your website pages impacts a site's hierarchy, and the fonts that you use impact how your website performs. Your page may look pretty, but if it doesn't perform, it's not a good design. Think about the metrics that matter to you. Website performance impacts metrics marketers care about, like traffic, conversion rates, and revenue. Let's take a look at an example. Carousel.com is a marketplace for buying and selling new and secondhand goods. Carousel.com reduced their load time by 65% and saw a 63% increase in traffic. How about another example? When former US President Barack Obama was campaigning for the United States presidential election in 2011, his campaign staff reduced the page load speed of his campaign website from 5 seconds to 2 seconds. A 3-second decrease in load speed helped the campaign raise an additional $34 million US. My advice is to test your page performance regularly. Make sure that you measure, monitor, and refine your website over time. And be careful about adding too many features to your website that could negatively impact performance. I'd recommend setting benchmarks for the performance metrics that you care about. This is called a performance budget. That way, you know that any feature that you add to your website must not exceed your performance goals. Keeping performance top of mind when scoping out new projects will give you a head start because it will help designers and developers create amazing experiences that perform well on the first day. The first criteria to look at when optimizing your website is the overall page load speed. Load speed is the time it takes to fully display the content on a specific page. Best-in-class web pages should become interactive within 5.3 seconds. That's how long people are willing to wait before they start clicking that back button and finding a different website that loads faster. Does your website take longer to load? If you're not sure, head on over to Website Grader to find out. It's listed in the resources section. Over the years, websites have grown in complexity. When diagnosing your website load speed, there are a few other metrics to look at, including first contentful paint and time to interactive. First contentful paint is the time it takes in seconds for text or images to be shown to the users. Time to interactive is when the page responds to user interactions, such as clicking, within 50 milliseconds. FCP and TTI are metrics that are growing in popularity. Being able to see content on a website and interact with its contents is closer to how users feel about the actual site speed than the actual page load speed itself. Improving load speed can help you improve both FCP and TTI metrics. There are many ways to improve your page load speed, including minification and compression. To understand minification and compression, we're going to talk about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This will not only help you understand how to reduce your page load speed, but it will also help you sound knowledgeable in front of your web development team. A natural place to start looking when increasing your website's load speed is to reduce the size of what's actually being loaded. That's where minification comes in. Minification is the process of reducing resources size by removing unnecessary comments and spacing in the source code. These characters include white spaces, line breaks, and comments, which are useful for humans but unnecessary for machines. Don't worry. Minification is not a permanent change to the code. In general, minification creates a new minified version of your source code. This means that you can always continue editing your source code and re-minify your code to make it smaller again. We minify the files of a website containing HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code to reduce the file size so that your web browser can read them faster. To understand minification, you first need to know a handful of things about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. They are all components of every website that define the structure, style, and behavior of a web page. Each of these components works together to create a web page. HTML provides the basic structure of the sites, which is enhanced and modified by CSS and JavaScript. CSS is used to edit the presentation, formatting, and layout of a page. JavaScript is used to control the behavior of different elements. HTML, CSS, and JavaScript can all be minified. But don't worry, unless you're a technical marketer and have built your website yourself, minification is usually a job for your web developer. But this might lead you to question what exactly is happening when you minify your files. To start, web developers create these files with convenience in mind. They make the code easier for people to read, including the white spaces, comments, and longer variable names. But this also creates larger files to transfer across the internet and more for a web browser to read. Minification essentially removes these extra elements, making it harder for humans to read, but easier and faster for web browsers to read. Here's what's happening when you minify HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. HTML minification removes all unnecessary characters from the HTML. CSS minification removes all unnecessary characters and comments from your style sheet file that contain font and layout rules. JavaScript minification removes all unnecessary characters and comments from the JavaScript. Wondering what tools you can use for minification? To minify HTML, try out the Page Speed Insights Chrome extension. For CSS, try CSS Compressor. For JavaScript, you could use JavaScript Compress. The second key way to improve page load speed is compression. Have you ever tried to send a file over email that was just too big and you had to compress it into a zip file to make it small enough to send? Well, that's compression at work. When someone arrives on your website, a request is made to your server, which is the computer program that stores, processes, and delivers web pages. This happens for every single file. The larger these files are, the longer it takes to load. Compression replaces repetitive pieces of code with markers directing to the first instance of that code. Compression's purpose is to reduce the file size during transfer from the server to the browser. Once the file arrives, the browser has to decompress it, like when you download a zip folder onto your computer and you can't just open it. You have to unzip it first. The same thing happens when the browser receives compressed files, but it's automatically handled by the web browser. While minification removes white spaces, comments, and non-required semicolons, compression removes all strings that are repeated. Let's take a look at an example. In this original CSS file, the strings are easy to read. A developer did this on purpose. This file makes the most sense to people who have actually written and edited this code. But this also makes the file size large. Once this file is minified, the file size shrinks, but it is also a whole lot harder to read because all of the white space and the extra symbols that break up the code have been removed. Now, if you take our original CSS file and then compress it, let's see how it looks. Special characters are used as place marks for where the duplicate code used to be. But what if you compress a minified file? This generates the smallest file size of the bunch. So how do you get started with compression? Well, there are a couple of solutions out there, including gzip and Brotli. They are both open source and free to use. Enabling compression can get pretty technical, and it will depend on the server and the CMS that you're using. If you're using the HubSpot CMS Hub, your files will be compressed automatically. But you can enable compression on other servers for your CMSs too. For those of you who are self-hosting your website, this is where you're going to want to work with a web expert. Compression is enabled by adding code to a file called the htaccess on the web server. htaccess files can be used to alter the configuration of your server to enable or disable additional functionality and features, including compression. To learn what code needs to be added to your htaccess file, check out the guide available in the resources. This walks you through what code needs to be added for a variety of servers. Minification and compression are two solutions to reduce your page size, but they perform their best when they work together. By removing extraneous code and marking duplicate strings, your web page will have a smaller file size, which means faster load speed. Let's dive into the elements on a web page that impact page size. Page size, also known as page weight, is the overall size of the block of stored memory that makes up a page. If you reduce the overall size of a page, you will increase the load speed. Minification and compression reduce the overall size of your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files. But what about the elements that these files actually include? Here are a few best practices for optimizing the elements of your web page to reduce the page size. You can use Google Fonts instead of custom fonts, use existing video hosting solutions, compress your images, and make your images responsive. Let's dive into each of these best practices. Fonts add weight to your web page, and custom fonts add even more. If your website uses custom fonts, and the person who is visiting your website doesn't have that font installed on their operating system, then their browser will need to download the web font files along with the rest of the website. Using Google Fonts decreases your page size. Google Fonts is a collection of fonts that are hosted by Google and accessible to all web browsers. Google has optimized these fonts to be delivered to web browsers in the most optimal way. So if someone using the latest version of a web browser, they receive the latest version of that font that is optimized for their specific browser. This makes downloading Google Fonts fast. Plus, they're free to use and people might already have these fonts cached in their browser, meaning that it's ready to use. Are you self-hosting your videos? If you are, you might be adding unnecessary weight to your website. Self-hosting a video essentially means that the video is stored on your own web server. This means that you're using your own server's bandwidth to display the video and increasing the overall page size of your page by doing so. This problem is an easy fix. Use an existing hosting solution like YouTube, Vimeo, or Amazon. All of these solutions can significantly reduce the weight of your page. Instead of storing your video content on your own server, you use their servers instead. To display the video on your web page, you can embed the video using the code provided by each platform. Plus, video hosting solutions do a lot of work on their end to ensure a smooth user experience and optimal viewing quality. Let's compare YouTube, Vimeo, and Amazon. YouTube is by far the most popular solution for many people getting started with video. Plus, it's free. But the videos do include ads and provide additional recommendations at the end of the video. Vimeo is an ad-free solution that'll cost you the price of about 2 coffees every month. Vimeo optimizes videos hosted with them to serve smaller file size to your website visitors. This means faster load speeds. Amazon offers more customization, but is also more technical. Depending on the size of your business and your level of technical competency, Amazon can be a good option. The problem with unoptimized images is that too many or too large of images can also bog down your page weight. To optimize the size of your images, there are a few solutions, some more complex than others. But at the very minimum, you should be compressing the images that you place on your website. Image compression groups parts of an image together to reduce its size without visibly decreasing quality. Here's an example of a compressed image. Take a look at these two images. The one on the left is the original full-size image. The one on the right is the compressed version. Can you tell the difference? Probably not. And just look at how much smaller the file size is. The original images is 2.8 megabytes, while the compressed image is only 1.3 megabytes. That means less time to load. But be sure to save the original copies of your images too. The compression will permanently alter the image. A great tool to compress your images is tinypng.com. It's free, easy to use, and effective. I recommend compressing every image you use on your blog posts, landing pages, and everywhere else on your site. But what about illustrations? If you have illustrations on your webpage, like a logo for example, save them as an SVG file. An SVG file, or scalable vector graphic, is a graphic file that uses a 2-dimensional vector graphic format designed specifically for the internet. These files contain an infinite amount of code behind them, which means that they can be sized to fit any screen automatically. For any image, not just SVGs, the size of your images matter because they determine how much space on the screen the image will take up. So we know that for illustrations, save them as an SVG, they can be resized automatically. But what about the rest of your images? Well, responsive images are a must. Take out your phone and view your website from a mobile browser. How do the images look? Are they sized correctly to the screen? Ideally, your page should never serve images in dimensions that are larger than somebody's screen. You might need some help from your developer for this one, but all it takes to make your images responsive is to add a few lines of code to your HTML or CSS. To make your images responsive, add a CSS rule that sets all images to fill the width of the container that the image is in. You can also set certain elements of the image to be fixed, like a max width. This means that your images will scale down, but never scale up. Depending on the type of images you're using, this might be helpful. Think about your web page elements. Who knew that seemingly simple things like text, videos, and images could have such a big impact on your page speed? By using Google Fonts, a video hosting solution, and responsive images, your on-page elements will be optimized to load their fastest. Every element that appears on a web page needs to come from somewhere. An HTTP request is an ask for information from the web browser, like Chrome or Firefox, to the server, the remote computer that fulfills that request. The server then delivers everything that needs to be displayed. This includes text, images, styles, scripts, and everything else that makes a web page a web page. Whereas reducing the file size of your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript impacts your web page's overall download size, reducing the number of HTTP requests reduces the frequency at which these downloads need to happen. Less frequent downloads means that a website can be displayed faster. If you want to create a high-performing page, aim to have 30 requests max. We're going to cover 4 strategies you can use to reduce the number of HTTP requests. Let's dig into how to combine text resources, combine image resources, move render blocking JavaScript, and reduce redirects. Web pages often have multiple script files. For example, you might be using multiple third-party JavaScript libraries to perform specific functions, like an image slider, analytics tracking, or animations. The result is many scripts slowing down your web page. Every file that you eliminate is one less HTTP request required to load your page. So how do you combine multiple text files, like JavaScript, on a single page? You can use an open source bundler, like Webpack or Parcel, to combine JavaScript files. If your website is being slowed down by having too many HTTP requests, and you're using multiple text resources, chat with your web developer to combine them. You can also combine image resources. The same logic applies here. Think of all the places across your website that share the same images. One thing that comes to mind are icons. You might have specific social share icons that match your brand style. You could include each image as its own file, but that increases the number of HTTP requests. This is where image sprites come into play. Image sprites are a group of small images that are included in one physical image instead of multiple. With the help of CSS background positioning, your web developer can reposition the single image in a variety of different ways to show you only the icon that you need. This can significantly decrease the number of image files that are limiting your load speed. Plus, it enhances consistency and ensures that all of your icons match across your entire website. It's common practice to put JavaScript blocks in your page header. JavaScript enables your website to behave differently based on the criteria that you identify. But the behavior of your website cannot change if it doesn't render in the first place. This means that the JavaScript in the header is essentially blocking the rest of the page from loading as quickly as it otherwise could. So how do you fix render blocking JavaScript? Move your JavaScript files to the bottom of your page for all non-essential functions. For critical functions, you can place your JavaScript directly in the HTML. Let's say that you want to greet users back to your website by using their name. This is considered a critical function because it completely changes the initial web page experience. To ensure that this JavaScript renders when the page first loads, you call it out directly where it's needed. Here's how this could look. Put critical JavaScript functions directly where they're needed on the page. This means that the JavaScript function insert text will load immediately. Other non-essential functions of your JavaScript file will load after the page renders. Redirects also require additional HTTP requests. A redirect is a way to send both people and search engines to a different URL from the one they originally requested. How many redirects do you have? Well, the best practice is to limit the number of redirects on a web page to a maximum of just 1. Too many redirects will slow down your page. Some redirects are okay, like 303 moved permanently and 302 moved temporarily. In these situations, you're probably not too worried about maximizing the load speed since these pages are already under maintenance. But what about the pages that you do want to optimize? For example, let's say that you want people searching for your website on mobile to see a version of your website that's optimized for their phone. One solution is to use a redirect, but this increases the number of HTTP requests on your web page. Another solution is to use a mobile responsive design. This optimizes your site for devices without any redirects. Avoid using redirects to solve problems on your website that can be fixed through a more strategic design. If you use HubSpot CMS, you don't have to worry about this since your website is automatically responsive for mobile users. Optimizing your web page for the first render is one thing, but how do you avoid time-consuming queries in the first place? Well, that's where caching comes into play. Caching is the process of saving resources to be reused. For website optimization, there are 2 types of caching: server-side caching and client-side caching. In server-side caching, the server saves the result of a single render and serves the same result when it's requested again. In client-side caching, the server tells a web browser to keep the files it downloads so that it doesn't have to download them again in the future. Caching benefits both content consumers and content providers. Caching can help you decrease network costs by reducing requests to your server and improve responsiveness by making your website faster for web browsers to retrieve. Plus, your content will continuously be available even if you experience server outages. Most elements of a website can be cached, including logos and images, CSS style sheets, JavaScript files, media files, and so on. Setting up caching for your website depends on the CMS that you're using. For the HubSpot CMS Hub, server and client-side caching works automatically without any additional plugins required. If you're using the WordPress CMS, you can use a plugin called WordPress Super Cache to cache your pages for you. The WordPress Super Cache plugin generates static HTML files of your web pages, which will be served to the majority of your users. This is a great turnkey solution for marketers without coding skills. Many of the other CMSs out there also offer caching functionality too. Check out the advanced settings in your CMS and look for options to enable page caching on your website. The role of HTTP requests and caching pages is technical. Be sure to connect with your web team to make sure that the solutions they are implementing are improving your website's overall performance, including HTTP requests and maximizing page caching. This will help you create web pages that render quickly, are lightweight, and follow best practices for website optimization.